Hello and welcome to my thesis presentation. My name is Sophie Leslie, and today I will be talking about the psychosocial effects of COVID-19 policies on students. To begin, I will establish context for my thesis and emphasize why my research matters. Next, I will provide an overview of my literature review, presenting key findings from each of the 6 themes. Then, I will guide you through my mini case studies that examine the pandemic response and policies implemented in countries with different ideologies, broadly grouped into the Global West and the Global East. Finally, through my analysis of the mini case studies and extensive literature review, I recommend 3 policies that should be implemented now in order to practice pandemic preparedness and reduce the risk of negative outcomes for future generations of students. On March 11, 2020, when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a worldwide pandemic, life instantly changed for students globally. 186 of the 195 world countries shut down their academic institutions, which has disrupted the learning of approximately 74% of all students in the world, or 1.5 billion students as estimated by Statista. As we all know, COVID-19 policies such as lockdown, school closures, business closures, social distancing, and quarantine have altered our lives as students in an unprecedented way. Personally, I have not spent more than 3 hours on campus a single day since I was in second year, and now I'm about to graduate. While these policies were necessarily implemented to protect the health of each country's citizens, they have also had large negative effects on well-being, particularly the well-being of students. There is an abundance of research that has examined how students have been impacted by various COVID-19 policies over the past 2 years. 77 articles were selected for inclusion in my literature review and provided data from 33 different countries. I broke the research down into 6 major themes: the communication of information, academic outcomes, wellness outcomes, financial outcomes, interactive variable outcomes, and recommendations. In general, I found that students were dissatisfied with how COVID-19 related information was disseminated. Students felt that the government was not communicating knowledge related to the novel coronavirus quickly enough, and when it was provided, it was not detailed nor clear. In particular, Chinese international students studying in the United States and the United Kingdom were shocked with the chaotic and confusing infodemic related to COVID, particularly because their home country would not allow rampant misinformation and conspiracy theories to circulate on such a large scale. When examining academic outcomes, overall, students had a negative perception of online learning and believed it to be of lower quality than in-person instruction. Adjustment to this new system was difficult and a major source of stress, particularly when teachers were not proficient in technology. However, more positive effects were seen in China, whose students used optimism to embrace the new online system, protecting them against the negative stressors associated with adjustment. Further, it was found that students were spending significantly less time engaged in online classes compared to in-person classes, which is problematic when we find that less learning is correlated to worse mental health outcomes. Productivity and motivation were particularly affected, with one study finding that American students had decreased their studying hours by 50% since the onset of the pandemic. In addition, the inability to interact with professors and peers in study groups and the absence of an appropriate home learning environment contributed to the finding that American students had a 50% decrease in academic performance. Due to these various academic outcomes, some students felt they would need to delay graduation or change majors towards one with better job prospects, i.e., higher security and more pay. Wellness outcomes were the most commonly researched and displayed the severity of negative effects students have experienced. First, sleep quality was reduced for all students. Younger students had a tendency to sleep too much, often over 12 hours per day, while older students experienced higher rates of insomnia. Second, physical activity was significantly reduced in most students, decreasing psychological well-being and increasing the risk for anxiety and depression. Third, support systems were dramatically reduced during periods of lockdown that prevented interactions with friends, classmates, and teachers, meaning that students had to find new ways of coping. In general, more positive effects were seen when students adopted problem-focused coping strategies, while avoidance coping was linked to significantly worse mental health. Unsurprisingly, rates of internet addiction, problematic social media use, and time spent playing video games or watching movies and TV shows all increased when compared to pre-pandemic periods. Further, one meta-analysis found that globally, 39.4% and 31.2% of post-secondary students displayed anxiety and depressive symptoms, respectively. Main stressors included low family income, absence of social support, technology or internet errors during exams, upcoming graduation, excessive COVID-related information, and a low perception of health. The existing literature also identifies that students struggle to gain access to counseling services, and that existing remote counseling infrastructure is insufficient to meet the needs of students. Sadly, discrimination against students from Asian countries due to xenophobia was particularly harmful and predictive of psychiatric and mental disorders. Business closures meant that many students or their parents lost their job or had their hours and/or wage reduced, causing financial insecurity. It is also likely that the transition to online instruction has produced learning loss, and for students directly affected by the lockdown, it may translate to future lower earnings. Further, housing insecurity was also a concern for lower-income students in particular, and was correlated with more severe mental health outcomes. Students from less privileged backgrounds suffered significantly worse outcomes compared to other groups, particularly because many are unable to access online learning material due to either unreliable internet or no internet, in addition to a lack of access to technology, such as computers, tablets, and smartphones. These students are also more likely to have a more stressful home environment and have additional responsibilities imposed upon them during the lockdown, such as caring for younger siblings. Stress, anxiety, traumatic symptoms, depression, suicide, loneliness, psychological distress, poor sleep quality, and poor adjustment are all significantly more likely to be found in less privileged students. When compared to male students, female students scored significantly higher on all mental health outcomes, which is unsurprising given the gender disparity already present within psychiatric outcomes. In addition, children with learning disabilities suffered from a disruption to daily routine and have difficulties working independently without supervision. And with the closure of daycares and special education schools, parents are unable to handle their children's specialized learning needs. Lastly, children with OCD may be one of the most highly impacted populations because of contamination obsessions and compulsions, hoarding behavior, and somatic preoccupation. In terms of recommendations, first, instructors should reduce workload and assignment difficulty, make lectures available for review, and ensure all materials are posted well in advance. Next, a pandemic management committee should be established at each post-secondary institution to proactively prepare for future pandemics. Further, considering the vast array of student populations that have different needs, tailored interventions should be introduced. It is also essential that teachers receive comprehensive technology training, and closely related is the need for institutions to develop better online learning systems. Moreover, telehealth or online mental health services should be invested into and implemented on a wide scale. In addition, to promote a positive home environment, parents should be provided with support. Further, clear and consistent information must be provided in a timely manner from both the government and academic institutions to reduce uncertainty. Finally, in times of crisis, adopting a more collectivist attitude may allow for a faster and more organized response that causes less psychological distress. Moving on to my mini case studies, China is a communist state that operates on collectivist principles, which enables the country to quickly organize in times of crisis for the health of all citizens, rather than focusing on individual rights and freedoms. Further, collectivism supports a centralized government that is able to effectively disseminate information quickly and avoid negative effects caused by misinformation and conspiracy theories. By contrast, the United States fiercely embodies individualistic values and will go to great lengths to prevent perceived attacks on their rights and freedoms. Individualism makes it hard to effectively respond to a pandemic, as was evidenced in the United States, since there were many more information streams which confused the discourse on what practices are most conducive to health and safety. Canada falls somewhere in the middle of China and the United States, such that they place value on their personal freedoms, but are also more willing to restrict those freedoms for the sake of the common good. As a result, Canada embodies a balance of collectivism and individualism. China was able to return to a semblance of normal life much faster than most countries and had a much lower rate of COVID-19 deaths per million at just 3, while the rates for Canada and the United States respectively were 1,012 and 3,044. While I am not suggesting that the United States become a collectivist nation, the research has demonstrated that a quick response to the COVID-19 pandemic leads to less transmission and better health outcomes, but also significantly reduces stress felt by students, vastly improving their mental well-being. This is exemplified by Chinese students who consistently experienced the fewest negative effects on mental health and had the lowest rates of anxiety and depressive disorders. Given the existing literature and case studies, a list of 3 policies can be suggested to enable a more efficient future response that will limit the negative consequences that students experienced in this current COVID-19 pandemic. First, academic institutions need to prioritize the establishment of a pandemic management committee, which will serve a wide range of functions, including reducing uncertainty, providing reliable information, acting as a space with access to free internet and devices, and as a resource for financial aid and counseling. Second, instructors need to be provided with comprehensive training to ensure technological proficiency and engagement with the students. Third, each therapeutic mental health practice should establish an online service that is easily accessible on the practice's website so that systems are already in place if closures of schools and businesses are mandated. In conclusion, it remains to be seen what the overall global effect the COVID-19 pandemic will ultimately have on students in terms of lost classroom time and higher sustained stress levels. Regardless, we must ensure measures are in place before the next pandemic to help prevent negative effects that have not yet manifested or been fully accounted for. Thank you.